Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome back to Cinematic Reviews. As always, I'll be your host, Chris, and this is the show about all things movies and TV. Well, we continue our MCU marathon today with Miss Marvel, another Disney Plus series. We're going to talk about what I thought about the show initially when it first came out. Now, after doing a rewatch, go through the cast, iconic scenes, favorite quotes, all that same stuff, and then we'll end everything like we always do with the rankings in the MCU. But before we dive into that today, a couple of reminders. You can watch the show every week at youtube.com and on Spotify. Yes, you can watch the show also on Spotify. Then you can also listen to the audio version on whatever podcast platform you deem worthy. The show is around the world, so just search for Cinematic Reviews and you can find it there. Also, check out all the social media pages, X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We're everywhere. So go ahead, follow, like, support the show. Thank you for everyone who has followed the show for 4 years now. It's been fun doing it, and I look forward to all the episodes coming in the future. Lots of stuff to cover for sure. And then also check out the official website for the podcast, cinematic-reviews.com, where you can set up a profile, and you can use the popcorn rating on shows like Miss Marvel and rank it with the rest of the MCU like I do on there. There's trivia games on there. I'm actually building a new game right now that I will release here within the next week or so to everybody. It's a fun game. It's an idea that's been rolling around in my brain, and I'm finally going to build it for the website. So go and check that out. Check out all the episodes and the shorts as well on the website. One-stop shop for everybody that is a fan of the show. So go ahead, set up a profile, and become a reviewer like me. So with that, there is no news and reactions today, so we're just going to dive right into our featured series, Miss Marvel.
I spend too much time in Fantasyland.
That is not you.
It's not really the brown girls from Jersey City who save the world. That's a fantasy too.
Did something happen to you?
No, why? Did you hear something?
Come on out. What does it feel like?
Cosmic. I always thought I wanted this kind of life, but I never imagined any of this.
Do you even know what you are?
I'm a superhero.
So Miss Marvel came out on June 8th, 2022. I remember talking about this show when it premiered on the podcast. It was still really new. It was one of the first shows that I ever talked about reviewing. And I initially really did like this show when it came out. It had a really fun first episode, getting to know Kamala Khan, who would become Miss Marvel, getting to know Iman Vellani as an actress. And then now, after rewatching it for today's episode, not feeling it hit as much now. There's a lot of problems I have specifically with how they handle her powers and the origins behind it. Now that I've done a lot more research and gotten more comfortable with Miss Marvel, the character from Marvel lore and all the comics and things like that. And then, of course, playing the Marvel Avengers video game that came out that pretty much prominently she was the star of, along with many of the other Avengers like Hulk, Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, but she was kind of at the forefront of that video game. And after playing that video game and then returning to this show, it's like, I wish they wouldn't have changed her powers and how she got them, but we'll dive into that a little bit more. Looking at the budget, it was about $150 million is what this show cost. It has 6 episodes, really quick 6 episodes. This is a really quick binge. I think it's like 35 to 45 minutes per episode, so it's really easy to go down. If you haven't watched Miss Marvel yet, or it's been a long time since you've watched it like me, it centers around Kamala Khan. She eventually discovers this bangle that came from her great-grandmother, and it activates powers, cosmic powers, you know, the light, purplish, whatever color you want to give it, that allows her to basically be a Green Lantern and create anything that she can think of. You know, mostly she's, you know, using it to enlarge her hands or stretch her hands out to reach to faraway places to save people, or she's, creating these little crystal discs to walk on so she could travel faster. Very similar to what they tried to incorporate from her powers in the comics and video games and things like that, where she is more elastic, like Mr. Fantastic. But it sounds like Kevin Feige chose to go this route because he didn't want two of those characters in the universe, I guess, with stretchy powers. But that's just kind of how Marvel is. If you've ever read a lot of the Marvel comics, a lot of these heroes have similar powers. Spider-Man is almost a version of the super soldier like Captain America is. He's super strength, super fast. He's got the agility as well, but he's got other attributes like spider related. So I think it's not a huge deal if you have Miss Marvel and Mr. Fantastic in the same world with similar powers. That's just how Marvel is, and after rewatching the show, I don't really like the decision to change her origins and what her powers look like in the show. They went more of a cosmic route with her than just being a mutant, which she basically is in the comics, is just a mutant. And we'll do another comic versus show segment today, since this is a character that I'm still getting familiar with and not a whole lot of people are familiar with her. She's pretty new. I think her debut in Marvel was like 2014 or 15 or something like that. So she's still very, very new to the Marvel lore that is vast growing. But that is kind of the brief story of this episode. She's learning these powers. And then as the show goes on, she starts to meet Cameron and his mom, who is part of this group of individuals called the Jinn, who are... I'm still kind of not sure what exactly their purpose is in the show. That is a huge another issue that I have, is that the villain is not really well thought out in the show, and there really isn't much of a villain in this show aside from Cameron's mom and her group of individuals that attack Miss Marvel and her friends and try to take the bangle from her. I assume that they want all the power for themselves, things like that, but this definitely has a villain problem for sure, and that's going to hold back my review and my overall rating for it when we get to the rankings later on today. But again, brief synopsis there, where she's basically learning how to control her powers, becoming this Miss Marvel hero, and then eventually we get that post-credit scene where it ties into the Marvels movies, which we'll talk about later on in our marathon. So, looking at the cast really briefly, it's not a very long cast list. It's a pretty contained story, which I like. Mainly focuses around Kamala and her family. So you have Kamala Khan, played by Iman Vellani, who I think is great as Kamala. She's really awesome. Definitely, this show is nothing against her. She was perfectly cast. I think she is an excellent Miss Marvel, and I'm hoping that we get to see more of her, whether it's in a season 2 of Miss Marvel or other projects. I would love to see her team up with Spider-Man or Kate Bishop, people that are around her age mostly, instead of teaming up with... She's already done the Captain Marvel team up with the Marvels. She is a Captain Marvel super fan. So we've already got that out of the way. Let's kind of bring her into other projects like Spider-Man, like, I don't know, maybe even Daredevil or things like that. Let's throw her into a bunch of different projects, kind of like Deadpool. Let's go the Deadpool route, where she kind of just pops up everywhere and helps out. We also get introduced to her best friend Bruno, who is very scientific. I can't tell if he's like in love with Kamala or they're just friends. That's the thing that they kind of shied away from, the normal, the best friends in love with her. I think there is hints of he might be in love with Kamala, but her focus is mainly on Cameron, who is a boy that she ends up meeting and introducing her to his mother, and the rest of the Jinn. But Bruno is great. I think him and Kamala have really good chemistry, as well as the two actors. I think Matt Lintz plays him, and Iman Vellani. They both have really good chemistry together. So that was a great pairing there. We introduced to her family, her mother and her dad. Her dad we'll eventually see. I think it's in Daredevil Born Again. He pops up, so kind of like universe building there. And then her brother as well, who's getting ready for his wedding. We also get introduced to another friend of hers, Nakia, who is... We mainly only see her in a few scenes at school, and then, of course, in the mosque. This is a very Pakistani culture focused show, which is something new for Marvel. They haven't really focused on that part of the world yet, and this is kind of their introduction to that part of the world, is Miss Marvel being a Pakistani character. So fans and audiences that are watching the show are getting more familiar with the culture of that area of the world with the mosques and things like that. So that's kind of where her character comes in as well. Then, like I said, we are introduced to her Cameron's mother, who is a part of the Jinn. Still not exactly sure what the Jinn is. Some kind of secret society that deals with some cosmic stuff. But again, villain problem. And speaking of villain problem, we actually have kind of a secondary villain in here, Agent Deaver, who is a part of the Department of Damage Control, who we'll see pop up numerous times in other shows like Wonder Man, Daredevil, Spider-Man, now Miss Marvel. So she kind of took it upon herself to hunt down Miss Marvel and stop the vigilantes or whatever. So she is going against the Department of Damage Control orders. So she is kind of a secondary villain as well. Again, just a really big villain problem here. There really is no defined villain, and the ones that they tried to picture as the villains of the show just wasn't really fleshed out, and it's very confusing, and you're just kind of like, why are they doing this? Do they just want power? You know, it's pretty obvious with Agent Deaver that she has kind of a vendetta against vigilantes, kind of like Kingpin does. So she wants to shut down all these heroes. But with Cameron's mom, and the Jinn, it's kind of confusing and not really presented, I think, well enough for the audiences to understand why they're hunting down Miss Marvel and the Bangle, and why do they want this cosmic power. It's just very, very confusing, very messy villain in Miss Marvel for sure. All right, a couple notes jotted down here that I wanted to touch up on because they were racking in my brain when I was rewatching this, and then we'll get into all the scenes and things like that. So Miss Marvel, like I said, has a villain problem, but it also has a third act problem. Shocker, I know, right? A Disney show having a really bad third act. This seems to be the trend, especially for Marvel, you know, with WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, not having great third acts, and similar, kind of not the greatest villain presentation for sure. Miss Marvel's no different. The third act is really boring. It's kind of your typical same power fighting each other, you know, just like we talked about with Phase 1 of the MCU, where Iron Man was fighting Iron Man, Captain America was fighting Captain America, Hulk was fighting Hulk. Like, it's just retreading what Phase 1 did with the hero of the story fighting themselves in a villain. This, of course, I'm talking about Cameron, who ends up getting cosmic powers similar to Miss Marvel, but he can't control them. So they're having this battle to contain this power from destroying New Jersey, and it just wasn't really done as well as it could have, or they could have just did a different route and had an actual villain. It's just really, really messy third act for sure. The Captain Marvel post-credit scene sets up the Marvels, of course. It's funny because Miss Marvel, and I'll talk about this more on the Marvels episode. I think Kamala is the best part of the Marvels movie. I am not a fan of Brie Larson's version of Captain Marvel. Monica Rambeau, who plays, I think it was like Photon or something is her comic book name. She's fine. We get to see Nick Fury once again, but he's kind of in and out of the movie. Kamala and her family are really the only good part of that movie that I enjoy, because it's Iman Vellani's performance as Miss Marvel. She is Miss Marvel, and I really like it. So it's just kind of, it's not surprising, but it's also very disappointing that Miss Marvel is the best part of a Captain Marvel movie. That just kind of shows how badly they have handled Captain Marvel, and Brie Larson not being my first pick as Captain Marvel. I think she's fine. She's serviceable enough in like Avengers, but in her own movie, it's a miscast for me. And it's funny that Miss Marvel is the best part of a Captain Marvel movie, even though she is the fangirl of Captain Marvel. So I just wanted to point out, I'll dive more into that in the Marvels review episode for sure. The family dynamic throughout the series is what really holds me liking this show a lot. I love the relationship between her family. I'm very close with my family, so that's kind of where I connect with this show a lot. You know, her, especially with her father, she's got a really special connection with her dad. And then eventually, you know, her and her mom start to realize that they're the same person. Her mom was very rebellious as she was growing up, and she doesn't want Kamala to make the same mistakes, just like any other normal parent does. So I really like the family dynamic. That's what keeps me entertained with this show, is her dynamic with her family. And it's really fun that they get kind of introduced more into the Marvels movie, and I wanted to see more of her family. It's really cool. I like to do the Leo point when her dad shows up in Daredevil at the bank, and when Matt Murdock meets him. It's really cool. So I really like the family dynamic part of this show. It's the best part of the show, I think, aside from Vellani's performance as Miss Marvel is really great as well. And then the graphics that you see throughout this show, it's really cool that that's Kamala's artwork. You know, she's very creative, artistic, and she's like fangirling it up. And I really like that they incorporated her artwork into the show with different, you know, when people react, it's like her scribbles, or she's like reading from a comic book that she wrote as a superhero teaming up with Captain Marvel, like a fangirl does. I thought that was a really good choice to make this different than other shows and movies that we've seen in Marvel, and also add some kind of fun factor for everybody. It's really cool. So I like that decision to incorporate her artwork as graphics throughout the show. It's really cool. And then let's talk about show versus comics. Specifically, I'm going to talk about her powers, because this is the biggest problem that I have with this show. So in the comics, Black Bolt, who is a part of the Inhumans, we met him in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, released a mutagen into the Earth's atmosphere. This activates any latent abilities within those belonging to that specific race. And Kamala's dormant powers are triggered when she is exposed to this mutagen in the atmosphere. So that is how she gets her powers. She is a mutant, so they just need to be kind of waken up, so to speak, and then that mutagen is what wakens them. Along with shape-shifting, she also has the power to heal pretty quickly once she reverts from her superpowered self to her usual self. So once she powers down, that's when she starts to self-heal. But for the biggest part, she's a shapeshifter. Just like Mr. Fantastic, that is her latent mutant abilities. And I wish they would have introduced that, because we've already been introduced to Black Bolt in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. So they could have just did the 616 version of Black Bolt. You know, releasing a mutagen, you know, kind of, that could have been the first episode or something like that. And it could have been similar to like Spider-Man Far From Home, where we open up and it's Nick Fury, Maria Hill going after the elementals. And that's where we're introduced to Quentin Beck, Jake Gyllenhaal's character, Mysterio. They could have did something similar there, where we open up Department of Damage Control or SHIELD or whatever you want to use as a entity is racing to stop Black Bolt from releasing this mutagen, because they don't want mutants, you know, growing in the world. And they could have arrested Black Bolt, and then that's kind of where they leave him. They could have just had him arrested for releasing this, you know, something like that, and that's how we get Kamala's powers. I think that would have been really, really cool. In the show, they obviously changed it quite a bit. The powers are unlocked the moment that she puts that bangle on that belongs to her nanny, or her grandmother, who actually got it from her mother. So they use another artifact, kind of like Shang-Chi. They use the 10 rings to give him his cosmic power. That seems to be Marvel's trend now, where they're using actual artifacts that give superhero their powers, and it kind of takes away the specialness, I think, of the heroes. I like the mutant route more, because that's how they were born to be superheroes. They weren't made, they were born. I like those. It's kind of like Spider-Man, where he gets bit by a radioactive spider, and the way that his genetics works, he was just destined to be Spider-Man. It's the same thing with Kamala here. You know, with that mutagen activating her latent abilities, she was meant to be Miss Marvel. Now with the bangle, it's a little different, because in theory, somebody could just put the bangle on and they have the powers of Miss Marvel. That kind of takes the specialness away from that hero. And I think that's where Marvel really dropped the ball, especially with this show, is changing the origins of the powers. And that's a very big detriment to this show, and why it's the title of the episode today is somewhat marvelous, because there's a lot of things that they changed specifically for her powers and her origins, and I just don't really like that. This is one that I'm wholeheartedly against. They should have kept with the original or close to the original origin and just made her have similar powers as Mr. Fantastic. It's not that big of a deal if you have two heroes running around with the same abilities. Maybe they could team up and they use those same abilities and learn from each other. That would have been really cool to get a Mr. Fantastic and Miss Marvel team up. Now it's just going to be kind of weird because she's got this bangle and it's more of a cosmic power than it is like his. So I think they really dropped the ball on that one for sure. All right, let's dive into some scenes, quotes, and a few fun facts. So scenes, like I said, it's a pretty quick show. It's only 6 episodes, about 35 minutes each, so there's not really a whole lot of iconic scenes that I pulled out of there, but I did manage to pull a few. So AvengerCon. This is a really fun one because we're introduced to this idea of Avengers-centered Comic-Con, basically. They have a Captain Marvel costume contest, which is what Kamala is stressing out about through most of the first episode. She's going to compete. She's going to win to show that she is Captain Marvel's biggest fan. And this is where she discovers her power. She puts the bangles on, the one bangle on, and kind of causes some havoc at the Avenger Con, but she ends up saving people and turns into this hero. So that's an iconic scene for sure. Kamala testing out her powers with Bruno is really fun. It really brings me back to some of the older Marvel movies, you know, like Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, things like that, where they're testing out their powers with their best friend or whoever it is. And it's really fun that they're, you know, especially with Bruno being a big science nerd, he's trying out different things and helping her understand what these powers are and what her capability is. So that's a really fun one between best friends discovering this. Cameron and Kamala versus the Department of Damage Control. This is at the last episode pretty much, where you get the different colors of light. You know, his is more like yellow and greenish. Hers is more pink and blue and things like that. So it's pretty cool to see Kamala in her like actual Miss Marvel costume that she got from her mom, which is a really touching moment there. And basically showing the world that she's a superhero. That's why I think this is iconic, because of seeing that. And then that father-daughter moment on the roof is a very touching moment. I really, really enjoy that moment where after the fight with Damage Control, Kamala comes home. She's still in her Miss Marvel suit. She's sitting out on the roof of the house. Her dad comes out and just kind of has a heart-to-heart with her. You know, you have that moment there where he's like, you know what Kamala means marvelous. And you are a little Miss Marvel, and that's where she gets her name, is Miss Marvel. It's a really touching moment there. So my favorite iconic scene, or the one I think is the most iconic, is probably the Avenger Con. That's the one that I think of the most. One reason being because Kamala is learning her powers and things like that, but also because it's Avenger Con. Like, I'm a big Marvel guy. I love the Avengers, so anything Avengers related is going to stick into my brain. I think that is the most iconic scene. One of my favorites, or my favorite, is probably the father-daughter moment on the roof. That really touched me a little bit, and it's due to the performances by the two. Just really, really great, and great writing, I think, as well, where they get this, you know, some people may think it's kind of a cop-out that Kamala means marvelous, so, oh, that's why this and that and this and that. Well, I really like it. I think it works. It ties into that family dynamic that I love so much in this show. So that is my favorite scene, but I think the most iconic scene is the Avenger Con moment. Favorite quotes, not too many here. I had a hard time plucking out any quotes that stuck out to me, but I did find a few of them that I liked a lot. So the Sheik from the mosque, good is not a thing you are, Kamala. Good is a thing you do. So life lesson there. This one from Kamala herself. Are you going to murder me because I don't want to be the subject of a true crime doc right now? I like that one. I'm a big true crime doc guy. I watch all the documentaries on Netflix and HBO and things like that. So that one stuck out for me. Another one from Kamala. There is no normal. There's just us and what we do with what we've been given. This, of course, talking to Cameron after he gets the powers from that cosmic entity, whatever it is. And then this one from Yusuf. You saved lives. And if you saved one life, well, you saved the world. I think that's really good fatherly advice to his superhero daughter. It's really good. Just save one life. And it's going to be viewed as you saving the world. It's really good quote. I think my favorite quote is, actually, I think it's that one. I think it's that one from Yusuf, her dad. Really good superhero life lesson for sure. Couple fun facts here, and then we'll kind of wrap things up with all the rankings. Iman Vellani reveals in the making of Miss Marvel that the Captain Marvel costume she wears during the fantasy sequence when Kamala is planning her trip to Avengers Con was previously worn by Brie Larson's stunt double during filming of Captain Marvel. So that is the suit that was used in the movie. That's pretty cool. According to Yusuf, Kamala's dad, the name Kamala and its male form Kamal stand for Marvel. A more accurate meaning would be perfection or accomplishment. I think in the show he actually says our little Marvel. But so just some technical meaning behind Kamala. They kind of tweaked it a little bit to fit into their storytelling that they were doing. And then there is a forewarning that this episode might be unsettling for some viewers. This was done as a previous episode. As in a previous episode, several Department of Damage Control officers marched into the mosque with their shoes on, which is seen as a means of disrespect to the mosque and Islamic culture. Many Muslim audience of the show took issue with it and posted tweets after tweets expressing their anger about Marvel not issuing a warning beforehand regarding this sensitive topic. So if you're wondering why on that last episode towards the end of the show, they have that little warning snippet at the beginning of the episode stating that there could be some unsettling elements of this episode to viewers. This is why, if you were curious on that. So that's a fun fact there for you. But yeah, so Miss Marvel, it starts off really strong with, Kamala discovering her powers. We're getting introduced to her character and Iman Vellani's portrayal of Kamala. We get introduced to her family, her friends. It's really cool. It had Spider-Man vibes to it, I think, with Peter and his Aunt May and MJ and Ned. It had a Spider-Man feel to it. But as the show went on, it really went downhill for me. It became not so marvelous towards the end. But still enjoy it. I enjoy Iman Vellani as Miss Marvel, and I really, really want more of her in the MCU for sure. I think she is confirmed for Doomsday, but I wouldn't mind having a season 2 of Miss Marvel, or having her jump into a Spider-Man movie or a Daredevil episode or 2, or teaming up with Kate Bishop in a Hawkeye show or movie. Like, there's so much that they can do with her, and I think she's a big enough fan favorite that would warrant another season 2, or just throwing her into various projects, because we need more Miss Marvel. Iman Vellani is really, really good as Miss Marvel. Like I said, she is the best part of the Marvels movie, and she is the best part of this show, and I really like her portrayal of it. So let's get more Miss Marvel into the MCU, Kevin Feige. All right, so let's wrap things up with all the rankings today. This episode is brought to you by Dubby Energy. Still drinking energy that quits before you do? Stop crashing, stop shaking, and start performing. Meet Dubby Energy, clean energy made for gamers, creators, and anyone who refuses to slow down. With zero sugar, no jitters, and no crash, Dubby keeps you locked in whether you're grinding ranked, streaming for hours, or pushing through those late nights. There's no crash, no fade, just gas. Drink different, perform better. Grab Dubby Energy and use code Cinematic10 to get 10% off your order today. All right, so I'm going to pull up the MCU rankings first. Again, you can rank the MCU on the website by setting up a profile yourself. You can rank the Marvel movies. You can rank specific ones. Like I have listings for the Spider-Man movie specifically, Batman specifically. Like you can rank anything pretty much on this website. So go ahead, set up a profile, and you can go rank universes like me. So Miss Marvel. Miss Marvel unfortunately lands at number 41 on our MCU list here. Right below it is The Falcon and Winter Soldier, Agatha All Along, She-Hulk, and The Incredible Hulk. Right above it is Ironheart, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, the first Thor movie, Captain America Brave New World, Wonder Man, Captain America the First Avenger at 35, and then Iron Man 2 at 34, to just kind of give you an idea of where I kind of ranked around it. Again, It's got a third act problem. It's got a villain problem because we really don't know what the villain is or what the purpose is or anything of that. We're going to talk about that more here very, very quickly with the villain scale, of course. But Miss Marvel, it started out really good, really exciting, really fun. And then as the show goes on and gets to the ending, it's just kind of like you're kind of bored and you're just kind of wondering what the point of all this is, what happened. And I think it's the moment where we meet Cameron's mom is where the show really starts to go downhill. So when we actually get introduced to the villain of it, like we could have just did like the Wonder Man, for example. There wasn't really like a clear villain in that one. It was more of a antagonist or someone to butt heads with, and that was the Department of Damage Control. They probably could have just did that too with Agent Deaver and Department of Damage Control. That could have just been that. We didn't need the Djinn. We didn't need Cameron's mom in there. We didn't need any of that. So definitely has a third act problem. And then, of course, changing her powers, I think, was very detrimental to the show and the MCU as a whole. They should have stuck with the original origins. But what I do like is, of course, Iman Vellani's portrayal as Miss Marvel. She's great. I love her enthusiasm. I love her charismatic nature. I love her fangirling out, to Captain Marvel. It's great. She was perfectly casted. I love the family dynamic. I love everybody they casted within her family. It's really, really awesome. That part of the show, like I said, the beginning of the show had a really good Spider-Man vibe to it. And of course, I'm a diehard Spider-Man fan. So obviously, I'm going to gravitate towards that. And that's the part of the show that I really like. So it's really unfortunate that the second half of the show wasn't as good or as marvelous as the first show. So Miss Marvel comes in at 41 on the MCU ranking list. All right, looking at the villain scale today, we have the Djinn and Cameron's mom, Nama, I think is how you say. Probably butchered that. Anyways, the Djinn is basically what it is. We're going to look at the performance, the costume, and the motivation, obviously, for the villain scale today. Performance is fine. Nothing to rage about. It's kind of, you can just throw in any generic actor into the Djinn. Nothing really special there. Same thing with Cameron's mom. Was fine. Costuming, fine. Just normal street clothes. Nothing really standoutish. Just kind of boring. Motivation. This is the biggest issue. Not really sure what their motivation was in attacking Kamala and her friends. Like, what do they want with the bangle? Do they want ultimate cosmic power? Do they want to protect the world from the cosmic power? I was very confused on what their motivation was. So with all that said, I'm giving them one Thanos head. Very, very low on the villain scale. One of the worst villains in the MCU. It's not, and it's all due to the writing. I think it's due to the performance is based on the writing. It just wasn't really fleshed out, really thought out as a villain. They should have just maybe stuck with the Department of Damage Control like they did with Wonder Man and just kind of have them butt up against Kamala as this new up-and-coming superhero and just have them as antagonists instead of introducing this whole cosmic Djinn thing. And if they wouldn't have changed their powers, we would have no need for this. We would have no need for the Djinn. We would have no need for any cosmic connection. And that's just, at the time that this show was coming out, Marvel was very determined to expand their cosmic part of the MCU. Well, I think this was the wrong character to do that with. They should have picked a different character to do that, and it's detrimental to this show and with the story that they were telling. So that's why I'm giving them one Thanos head for the villain scale. Popcorn rating, 3 popcorns. So not bad, and the first part of the show is what really holds this up. In theory, this could have easily been a 2 popcorn show. But I like the casting of Miss Marvel. I like the family dynamic. I love the music that they chose in here. I love the graphics of her artwork going around. I love the family dynamic, the Spider-Man vibes that first part of the show gives you. And that's what holds it to 3 popcorns. If they wouldn't have had that, or if that wasn't as good, this would easily be a 2 popcorn show. But because of the third act, because of the villain, because of that second half was so boring and really confusing and uneventful, it's stuck here at 3 popcorn. So that is what I'm giving for Miss Marvel. Well, that's going to do it for today's Marvel episode. Next up, I believe we have Thor: Love and Thunder. Yes, so we're going to head back to the MCU movies for the 4th Thor movie, which I'm very excited. I haven't seen this since it came out. I believe this was one of the new releases that I did on the podcast back when I first started the show. So it's going to be very fun. I have not seen it since it came out in 2022 or whatever it was. So I'm very excited to see what my thoughts are on Thor: Love and Thunder once again. After that, we'll jump back into Disney Plus with the She-Hulk, which I remember absolutely hating. So we'll see what my thoughts are on that. And then we'll dive back into the movies with Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, which I'm very excited about. I watched that one about a year ago, and it's still held up. It's really fun. So I'm excited for these upcoming Marvel episodes as we get closer and closer and closer to the current timeline for Doomsday, which comes out on December 18th. We're almost there. Only a few months away. We got Spider-Man coming only weeks away. Very excited for that. We'll continue the Spider-Man marathon as well. That'll be probably the next episode that releases on the show. Will be Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, which has been praised as the best Spider-Man by some people. It's definitely my favorite of the trilogy for Sam Raimi. So very excited for the Spider-Man 2 episode coming up. So with that, enjoy the rest of your guys' weekend, and we'll see you all next time on the show.